And record. What's going on, fast turn watchers, listeners, replay catchers, gompers? What's up, man? Fist pump. So it is June 22nd, and I am Aryeh Scheinbein sitting in for Dwayne Malik, who is on vacation for the next few weeks from his fast turn. I'm supposed to do the fast pump. Dwayne is on vacation from his fast turn radio show. So we are going to keep the show going, and that people will have where to turn into on their regular scheduled evening. So tonight I wanted to talk about a few different topics. And unlike Dwayne, I am not a big full numbers disclosure person, but we're going to talk about some fast turns. We're going to talk about, because that is the name of the show, we're going to also talk about debt inventory, and we're going to talk about generating some cash. So the first thing I wanted to talk about tonight was I think we all experienced probably back in March, there was a time where we were not able to actually send inventory in. And ASINs were getting blocked, and people were just getting messages, remove this item from your shipment, and you weren't able to send different things in. So what Amazon ended up doing was they slowly released that, but they were finding that they have a ton of inventory that people are just sitting on. And I think a lot of sellers have mistaken the Amazon warehouses for warehouses, which they're really not. They are fulfillment centers, and they want the inventory to turn through there. So they want fast turning or just regular turning inventory. And they found that people were basically storing things there. So, a few years ago, it used to be long-term storage fees were assessed once a year. And then probably about a year or two ago, they switched that to every 6 months, that instead of charging it once a year, they charge it twice a year, right? So in February and in August, if something's been there half a year, they start charging you pretty excessive fees in addition to your monthly storage fees. And clearly in Q4 last year, I think a lot of people experienced a lot of slowdown with things checking in. And it seems that part of the issue is that the backlog in the actual warehouses was just excessive. So, so in March, they went through a little bit of a hiccup where they kind of blocked things from coming in. And then they've instituted a few new things. So one of the things they introduced was that this coming November and December, they are going to charge basically 3x the storage fees for everyone who keeps things in the warehouses, the fulfillment centers, for more than 30 days. So the real reason for that is obvious, right? They want to be able to kind of plow through things, and they want everybody to be moving through their inventory. And it made me stop and think about the business, and it kind of goes back to Dwayne's whole model that he's founded this whole thing on, and that is fast turns. And what it actually made me think about was, we have long-term storage fees coming up in August. So August 15th, I believe, is when they begin to assess, your annual long-term storage fees. And one of the things that Amazon has done recently, and I was going to do a screen share, but in order not to mess the whole thing up, I'm just going to talk it through it, was that they've made improvements inside Seller Central, where it used to be, in order to kind of get your long-term storage fees numbers to know what actually was going to be charged, it was a little bit of a process. You had to go into Seller Central and reports and fulfillment, and then there was something like inventory health, and there were a few different reports in there. But now they actually made it really, really simple. And if you go into your Seller Central account and you click on the inventory tab, there is now, just click on manage inventory. And below that, now there's like sublinks, let's call it. Below the gray line, there are sublinks, and there are blue hyperlinks, right? There's all inventory suppressed, listing enhancements, remove unfulfillable inventory, fixed stranded, blah, blah, blah. And then the last one is called the inventory dashboard. And if you click on the inventory dashboard, it's actually a lot of reports that used to be pretty buried and a little bit more difficult to find are really now at your fingertips. And they basically tell you, out of stock SKUs that you're losing sales on, the excess inventory where you're selling things slowly. And so the first box, the first widget is really like the managed excess inventory. So you have too much stuff. They're basically telling you what your supply looks like. How long it'll take to sell through the supply given how fast things are selling. And then you have, on the right-hand side, a few other things. They tell you about the restocking the low inventory items. But on the bottom left-hand side, the box there says the FBA inventory age. And they tell you if it's 0 to 90, 91 to 180 days, and so on and so forth. And it tells you what percentage of your business, of your inventory is actually inside there. And if you click on the view details of that, then you actually will tell you exactly what it is that is the estimated long-term storage fees that are coming up as of August 15th. And you'll see they actually, in this report, they break down literally how long each piece of inventory is. So let's say you had 200 units, but 10 of them got there last week, and 50 of them got there 91 to 180 days, and so on and so forth. And it basically tells you in this column, estimated long-term storage fees, it tells you exactly how much the total is and how many units you're being charged on. And it even tells you how many you sold in the last 90 days. And again, go in there and check it out. But one of the really cool things then is on the far right side of that report is you can actually download it. So you extract it, and what's the button actually says? Download report. Yep, and you download that report, and that I may be able to do a screen share of, because I think I downloaded mine before and I kind of set it up, but again, not to mess the whole thing up. You download it and it breaks it down and it pulls it into a CSV file. You put it into Excel, and I really, hang on, if I do this without messing the whole thing up, maybe I can actually get my report open. I just don't want to pull something up that I'm not supposed to, and I'm not really familiar with Zoom. But anyway, the point is it tells you how much you're going to pay in total for each line, SKU that you have there, right? So when you look at it, what I do is I insert another column after that total fee, and I divide it by the number of units that I'm going to have. So I'm actually trying to open this report here so I can do this live on the screen. I'll see if I can do this. But ultimately, let's say you're paying $100 for your inventory of that specific SKU, and you're paying, and there are 100 units. It tells you, right, that you're paying $1 per unit. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure no one will buy my inventory. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna, if we try and do a screen share, I feel like doing now. I'm like trying to do it on the fly, but if we kind of just cut everything off, it should work. Okay. All right, we're gonna try this. If it fails, I'll immediately shut it off. But what I wanted to do here is pull this up. So if you're going to be listening to the replay, you obviously aren't going to be able to really see. So, all right, you're probably seeing, hopefully, what I'm seeing. And when you pull this report out, what I first do is I click on the first line, and then I go and I freeze the panes. So you kind of go to view data, freeze panes, and so that way when I start kind of like scrolling down on things, you actually don't lose the view. And my computer seems to be super slow, so it's not really working. But here you see that the inventory age and things like that kind of stay up. So basically, column R is what they've calculated for you, telling you the total amount is. Oh, and then I go and I highlight, the first row, and I create a filter so that I can filter everything if I want to see it by how much they're going to charge me and stuff like that. So units on hand, they tell me that there are charged 6 months, 186 for this item, and they expect it's going to be $368.91. And then what I do is I insert column Q. And what all it is a simple formula where I want to divide the number of units by the amount. So I know now that I'm being charged $1.98 per unit. And this way, when I kind of get closer to, the time where I have to decide whether I'm going to pull it out or not, at 40 cents, like, so this item, it doesn't make any sense for me to pull it out because it's going to cost me 50 cents to remove it. And then it's going to cost me, something to pay someone to either send it in. I'm going to have to pay shipping for it, and so on and so forth. So for me, I kind of make a decision that at $2, it's not even, a thought to do this. But if you see some of these I've highlighted in yellow, it's $8 a unit, $6 a unit. So this is where I've now taken an approach where I want to kind of get ahead of the curve and get rid of these things. So if you see in my column S, I started updating where I'm actually at. I've been slowly selling through some of these things. And so green, I've highlighted that, I've totally unloaded it already. And basically, the idea of tonight's show was I want to talk about, hey, first and foremost, kind of know what your dead inventory is. And then the next thing is that you really want to be thinking about generating the cash, right? So we're all sitting on this inventory, and the real question is when is it really worth it to sit on it, and when is it not? So the first thing about that report is when you go into it, you'll actually start to see how much are you going to be paying to have it sit there. So if you actually sit on this thing, are you going to make another $6 a unit? As you saw in that, when I opened up that spreadsheet, some of the things are 40 cents, some of them are $2, whatever it is. But if you're so far out of the buy box, you bought something last Q4 and you thought it was going to sell, and here you are, and you're $30 off the buy box, and it's going to cost you $6 to keep it there through August. Well, you have to now make the assumption, do the calculation for yourself and say, well, if I sell it today, take the buy box price, add $6 to it, am I happy with that price? Or add $8, whatever the number is. And sometimes you get a little bit of attached to your inventory and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, you got to look at this as a business, and you got to look at the cash flow and say, how much dead inventory am I truly sitting on? And I think this report is, very overlooked. And now that it's so easily accessible, you can actually monitor it all the time. There's a little bit of lag in that system. So when you go in there, it may be 1 to 3 days behind schedule or so, but it's pretty accurate. And you can kind of update it yourself if you want, as you saw I was doing with my spreadsheet. But here we are, we're in the middle of June. And at the end of the day, like, it makes sense to think about, well, what am I doing with my money? Am I out of money? Like, everyone's business is different. Some people have too much money, some people have too much time. But at the end of the day, like, you have stuff that's not selling. It may make sense just to move it out. So look at how much you're going to get charged, and look at how far away you are from the buy box. And do you think it's really going to get back there? The one thing we've seen time and time again, that Q4, the pricing pressure just keeps coming, right? More and more people are finding Amazon, more and more people are doing FBA, and it doesn't necessarily mean that every Q4 everything sells, and people are going to be playing on different margins, and maybe they bought it on clearance when you were buying it, not on clearance last year. Maybe they bought it on a closeout, not even just clearance. They have hundreds of units. So you have to really look at it now and say, does it make sense to be sitting on this? What can I do better with the money? And I think that that's an important thing, that when we talk about fast turns and we talk about our businesses and we understand what's going on in the business, I think a lot of people are sitting on a lot of dead inventory that they don't even know exists. And this was the motivation for Amazon's whole penalty for keeping things in November and December, as well as the long-term storage fees twice a year as opposed to once a year. So take a look at that report, go through it, and I think you'll find a lot of, potentially unpleasant surprises for yourself. But at the same time, you'll find that you may see a spike in some sales, but it'll help free up some cash flow. So, I've been selling for a while, and I actually have daily payouts versus a 2-week payout where a lot of people have. But if you're looking at this as a true business and you're saying, well, I'm tight on cash flow, or I need additional money, or whatever it is, I'm sure if you go through that report, you'll be shocked at some of the things, even if it's ones and twos items that are just kind of sitting there and they're not making any money for you. They're dead inventory that may or may not get back to those prices, but you have to look at what can you do with that cash today, reinvest it into your business, and say, you know what, just move on. Don't get attached to the inventory. Wow, that toy was so great last year or the year before. I really thought it was going to do well. I know it's going to do well. You have to really look at the numbers. And when you pull out that report, you may be surprised that the item is not oversized, but they're charging you a ton of money for that because it's like large, standard large. And is it really worth it? Do you really think you're going to get back to those points? So I think, this is the time of year where, some people suffer in the summers, some people thrive in the summers. I think if you're seasonal selling, you probably are doing phenomenally well right now. And if you're just a standard newer seller who's just getting into the rhythm of whether it's online or retail arbitrage, this is a time for you to say, hey, I need to assess this. I need to really look at this and decide what makes sense for my business. So I think, Dwayne and I were talking about this yesterday, and it was a very interesting discussion where a lot of people just, A, don't even know the report exists, but B, didn't know how to get to it, and C, don't realize what they're actually going to get charged. So go through it. I think you'll find a lot of money that you can have right now. And the other thing is look at your returns. Ryan Wateska in AFT made a video the other day about he's basically going through his warehouse right now. So, if you have a prep center that you are behind in sending some things in, or you are just hoarding things in your basement or things like that, where you bought last year and were hoping to send it in, you never did, take a look at some of this stuff. I think first and foremost, you'd be surprised where some of these things are priced at. I know there was a point a month or two ago, and I don't currently actively sell them, so I don't know, but I know a lot of the Paw Patrol items have either been discontinued or they're kind of in between manufacturing cycles on them. And some of those toys that probably tanked, you bought at like $8 to $13 a unit, and you were hoping to get, let's say, 25 to 30 back then, and who knows what, it tanked down to like $14.99. You may be surprised to find that some of them are in the 40s right now. So I think, go through your stuff, both that is hanging out inside someone else's warehouse in your basement, as well as dead, so to speak, inventory, because you may have priced something with a repricer or without a repricer where your minimum price is maybe even only like $3 off the buy box, and you're going to get charged a $6 storage fee for that come August. So you don't have to dump it. You don't have to tank the price. All you have to do is just be smart, go through your stuff, and recognize that there's probably a lot of free money just sitting out there. Generate free cash, because there's going to be sales. Toys R Us has done like the summer blast off clearances all the time. There's going to be end of season, and then you're starting to head back to school, right? So maybe you need money to start to buy your back to school inventory, and that's coming around the corner. So, I know summer's just starting, but at the same time, you got to get ahead of these things. So, in thinking about this to me was an interesting topic. If anyone has any questions on that, I see there's some chat going on there, but for the most part, if anyone doesn't understand the penalties and what Amazon wants to charge, I don't even think you have to sit around waiting for Amazon to let you know. Now that they've kind of made this inventory dashboard very easily accessible for you, go get that report, go check it out. And I think you'll be surprised if you're not moving inventory or you haven't seen certain things. I think a lot of people, they send in, 3 to 10 of something, or if they have a wholesale account and they're selling and they're selling and selling, they don't notice if they just stop selling something. If you're on top of it and you have your alert set up and you have your restock pro type of things going on, that's one thing. But when you have like the ones and twos that are just sitting out there and you have no idea that they're in there, if you don't have inventory lab, which is an expense that some people do or don't have, this is a very simple way to like know what's hiding out there, know how long it's been sitting in there. And even that dashboard, it basically tells you how long things are there, what percentage of your inventory has been sitting for how long. And you may be unpleasantly surprised to find out that 30% of your stuff has been there 6 months or longer, which is probably not really healthy for your business. So I thought this was a very interesting thing. It also gives you 2 months now, right? So you're a little past June 15th. We're in 22nd, as opposed to waiting till the prices tank, where people are dumping things like, think about like the chocolate market right before the meltables date comes up. All of a sudden you can buy, like literally you could buy like a 36 case count of chocolate like for $4, where it's normally 40 or something like that, because everyone wants to get it out. And so don't get caught waiting till the end. And the other thing is that if on some of these things, if you wait too long, I think they're going to start to send emails maybe July or early August that if you wait to, they pulled this new thing last year where if you waited till like August 1st or later and you pulled it out for the August 15th, you weren't allowed to send it back in till October 1st. So get ahead of this now. If you start selling it at normalized prices for the next, let's say 30 days, you don't find yourself in a situation where you can't, when you pull it out, you can't even send it back in. So if you pull it out now, because you don't think it's going to make sense, sit on it for a month or two and then send it in, you'll be allowed to. Karen makes a good point that some of these things, Prime Day isn't just about, if you have a lightning deal or if you have, the hottest toy. It's also a good time that the site is experiencing tremendous excess volume of peoples, right? Like Amazon is spending millions upon millions of dollars in marketing dollars to drive extra traffic to their website that day. And make sure your buy box ready, because if you're just outside of it in the sense of the algorithm is not picking you up because you're $3 too high, and that $3 is more like 10%, think about it. Is that $3 really worth it? Yeah, maybe your ROI isn't what you want. Maybe you maybe even lose some money. I think, a lot of people have talked about a lot of different things over these shows and stuff like that, but you have to look at your inventory as a portfolio. And if you've sold 7 out of 10 at a profit and you end up losing money on the last 3, you probably net out ahead on those 10 items on that one SKU. And then in the broader sense, let's say you have 100 SKUs, 200 SKUs, 500 SKUs, whatever it is. If you're losing money on a few of the SKUs, no big deal, because you should be making enough money to cover that on the other SKUs. So these are some of the things to think about. I think, an interesting thing for me in going through this report early on was seeing, I've moved a lot to shoes and clothing. And, some of these things are definitely slower sales, or at least have like a 6 to 9 month sales cycle. So if that's what's happening, you have to look at the margins and say, well, if I haven't sold the shoe and that season came and went, or that season's about to come, and they're going to charge me, the shoes, some of the shoe boxes are pretty big. If I'm going to get dinged with a $5 fee just on a long-term storage fee, and then I know I'm going to pay, let's say, $5 more in November, you need to make sure that your margins are there. Because if you think, oh, I bought it for 30 and I'm going to sell it for 60, yes, I'm going to make like $15. At the end of the day, like, you need to know that your storage fees aren't going to eat up all of that. So you want to be thinking through some of this. Michael makes a point, which is completely true, that a lot of third-party prep centers will let you store their overstock inventory there for no charge. I do use Michael's prep center, and I'd say back in March or so, I pulled out a fair bit of stuff. So I thank Michael for that. But the point is really, in a broader sense, know your numbers, but in this particular topic, in a micro sense, pull out that report, go through things. I think you'll be pretty surprised And, I think there were a bunch of things I can think of from mine that I was probably looking to get $80 a unit, and the buy box was at 75. The storage fee was going to be $6. And, yeah, maybe the market will come up in the next 2 months to the $80, but why chance it and bother and have to worry about, well, did I sell it in time, or am I going to have to pull it out and then not be able to send it back in? And I ended up selling through all this stuff at, $75. And net, I look at it as I came out ahead by $1 because I lowered my price by 5, but I would have had to pay 6 to keep it there. So if I kept it and got my $5 extra later, I would have paid 6 in storage. So that's kind of one thing. Karen asked an excellent question. She asked if I do advertising at all. And the question is really, do I run ad campaigns for my stuff? And I've actually have started running ad campaigns specifically targeted at different segments. So yeah, I've always run ads, and I do run ads in general, but for the long-term storage, I have an entire ad campaign going for it. And some of the numbers have been great already. I started the ads, I want to say on roughly late May, early June. And the way I do it, and I am not by any means the PPC ad expert on this, but what I do is I basically run an automatic targeting ad for about 2 weeks. I let it run, whatever it is. I put in a budget, pretty low budget, and want to collect the data so that I have the keywords, and then I can kind of see where I'm paying for, what is actually selling through, what's not selling through, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And then you can run like targeted ones, the more manual ones. And then I run side by side, like automatic with the targeting in the manual, whatever you want to call it. And that way it allows me to kind of refine. A lot of times you end up paying, like if you have a branded item, you pay a lot of money for clicks that are not relevant, and you're not getting any sales. But I've actually seen pretty strong, for what I've spent, which is pretty little, pretty high sell-through on some of the stuff. And the items that I'm seeing a lot of clicks with no sales, I could pause that specific one. So if you go into the advertising campaigns, you can actually pause just for different ASINs. You can, each ad is basically separate. And the other thing that it allows me to do then is when you're not in the buy box, it doesn't tell you, you don't pay for it, but it tells you you're not getting, your ad's not eligible because you're not in the buy box, which that basically allows you to kind of take all those ASINs, go to your repricer or whatever you're doing. And, if you're off again by like $1 or so, is it really worth it? So just kind of go into the repricer, change it, and ultimately you'll be able to get to the buy box. You'll be able to, the ad will actually start to generate some traction for you. So that is where we are there. So first and foremost, I wanted to thank everyone who kind of has shown up live. I know Dwayne always thanks everybody, but I greatly appreciate it because some people actually have no idea who I am, and some people do. And so I appreciate the people who are here live. And now I see Mendy Sarah, I assume it's Mendy, is here. Harvey's here. Yes, who is this guy? So going through here, Michael's here, and there's a whole bunch of people, and not everyone has their last name, so I'm not going to try and go through everyone. But I appreciate it because I know you're taking an hour out of your night, your time, your family, whatever you're doing. So thank you for showing up. And Karen, my pleasure for stepping in. I think it's important for Dwayne's people to always have something consistent, and he's delivered that for quite some time for all the people, and didn't want it to his audience not to have the consistency, and he shouldn't have to not be able to go on vacation. People with real jobs like myself, we get vacation time, and things keep rolling. So that's part of the benefit of your business here. It's you have the flexibility, so he should have that flexibility. And no, Mendy, I'm not winding down. I just didn't thank everybody in the beginning like Dwayne does. I actually just got right into it after I did Dwayne's regular intro. But we we've kind of finished the first segment on long-term storage, which brings me to the next segment, and that is I wanted to talk a little bit about fast turns, and it wasn't anything in particular, but it was more about the concept of people. A lot of chats have kind of showed up. I want to say like questions in the groups of, where are you growth wise? Beaver asked the question, then Mendy kind of refined that question. People talked about where you are to your plan and things like that. And this kind of went hand in hand with the whole long-term storage, because the idea of long-term storage wasn't just about the cost and knowing your numbers, but it's also about generating free cash flow. So freeing up money that's sitting dead, what's the point of it, right? Like, okay, now I have cash. If I have nothing to do with the cash, that's a whole other story, but there's always something to do with the cash. And I think, people who are not sure where their business is going, one of the things they want to think about is just turning inventory over and over just to generate cash. Like, a lot of people are always worried about their returns. They're worried about getting the right profit margins. And you have all kinds of different business models out there, and everyone's is going to be different. And, one of our guests this summer is actually going to be, it's going to be Dan Metters and maybe Dylan. It's going to be the wholesale formula guys, right? And so they're going to come on at some point, and they run on a totally different model than everybody, because they're all about turning inventory, and they're running on different margins because they're buying wholesale and they're moving a ton of volume. And then you have people like Harvey, who's doing a ton of volume all in RA. But at the end of the day, like, you need your cash to be constantly turning. So if you take this long-term storage stuff, or this dead inventory, as I've been calling it, and you turn it into cash, I think one of the important things for people to recognize is learn the lesson from that. So you went out, you bought a whole bunch of stuff, whether it was Q4 related or not, and it just kind of like sat around. And the idea is now, why did it sit around? What happened to it? Was it a bad buy? Yeah, it could have been a bad buy. Was it, something that just you misanalyzed or what have you? Could be. At the same time, it could have been that you've learned so much more since the last time you bought it, whether it was 6 months, 9 months, 12 months ago. And it may make sense that to refine your parameters, right? When you start in a category, you say, oh, beauty, 80,000 in beauty, I'm gonna do okay with. And then you find out, well, you know what? It really only sells like 3 a month or 3 a week, but it sells 3 a week, and I share the buy box with 4 people, so I don't even get a sale a week. So I'm going to dump that. I'm going to refine it. I'm not going to do more than 20,000 in beauty, whatever the numbers are. And again, it's your business in particular. But I think this time of year, there's a lot of product that moves at tremendous volume, and the velocity of some of these things. I think, people underestimate the seasonal selling. And by seasonal, I don't mean like a Valentine's Day. I mean, like, think of the summer. Think of all the activities that so many people across the country can be doing. And ultimately, whether it's, warm related things, water related things, shoes related to the weather, clothing related to the weather, all these different things, a lot of this stuff moves at tremendously improved velocity, and you want to capitalize on these things. This is when you have the ability to kind of go out, see the market, and say, hey, what am I doing as a consumer? What are my neighbors doing as consumers? And attack that. And your margins can be way, way lower than you would normally want your 100% ROI to be, but you're going to just turn it over and generate additional cash on it. So, I think everyone's business is going to be different, but if you're unsure how you're going to generate cash, I would say look at certain things that are going on in the general time frame that it is, whether it's winter or whether now we're in the summer, and sell things with a quick, fast turning velocity to generate cash. And you'd be really surprised. I think two years ago, someone approached me with some products and said, hey, what do you think about this? And it was probably like 2 or 3 months before that season. And I went and I looked at Camel, and I was shocked. Like if you were a scanner, so to speak, right? You went to a store and you scanned it, and it said 200,000 or 100,000 rank, you'd be like, forget it. But if you actually do the research and you find out, then 2 months from now or 3 months from now, that thing is going to be ranked sub 1,000 or sub 10,000 or whatever it is, and you're positioned ahead of time. You know, the summer, there's a ton of stuff that has that you can still go out even in June now and buy that, because you have now the rest of June, July, and August, and maybe even the beginning of September to sell a lot of this stuff, which leads to the next thing that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier on, is back to school. Now, you're not going to get certain things now in the stores, but if you're a wholesale buyer, you've already probably placed your back to school orders, or you're placing your back to school orders. And these are things, again, you want to be thinking about a little bit in advance. Look at the ranks that, you know, historically where things going to trade at, so to speak, right? Where they're going to be in 2-3 months from now. And you're going to be, you know, if you were to scan it today, you'd be like, forget it. But if you actually do a little legwork and take this cash that you've generated from your long-term storage debt inventory and you put it to work into these other things, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the velocity that it sells at and the returns that you're going to get from it. So these are things to be thinking about now. I think, you know, this is the time where people are enjoying their lifestyle as well. And, you know, at the same time, I know it seems crazy, but Q4 is not that far away. So you kind of get into the back to school, which for some people is better than Q4. And before you know it, then it's September and you're kind of lining yourself up for Q4. And Q4 doesn't have to be toys. It doesn't have to be specific to the holidays. There's just like a ton of things that kind of go on the back quarter of the year where people are baking a lot more. People are in their house a lot more. The home and kitchen, you know, segment is a phenomenal segment during that time. It's a great gift. It's great usage, and it's very high ASP, which is another thing that, like, I'm a very big fan of, right? So, you know, I've gotten a lot into shoes and clothing, and part of the reason is because with the higher ASP, you obviously generate a, you know, higher dollar amount. At the same time, your ROI may or may not be as high, but the dollars of profit per item are going to be much higher. The pick and pack fees and the shipping fees are a much smaller percentage of your overall net take in. And I think people, you know, some people fully get that, some people don't. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunity with higher ASP items, whether it's shoes, whether it's clothing, and whether it's home and kitchen. I think I've met a lot of sellers who've shifted obviously to the shoes and clothing. You know, Mendy says that is now 92% of his business. I'd say shoes continue to grow as a percentage of my business. I know a lot of big sellers who've really moved into that, but at the same time, you have to know yourself, right? Like if you need the diversification, keep the diversification. If you want the focus, then take the focus. But higher ASPs in many situations, they just generate a ton of cash. And, you know, thinking about that for the summertime or for the back to school time, right? If you're going to sell a $15 lunchbox, really, how much profit is there in that particular item for you? And how many are you going to sell versus if you were selling a much more expensive product, whether it was $50 or $60 or $70, how much profit is in that? And how many of those do you need to sell the same number of $15, you know, lunch boxes? So I think these are things to kind of be thinking about. You know, people are in the chat here talking about what percentage breakdown they are of their businesses. But I think these are kind of the things that, like when Dwayne and I were talking about his show, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, knowing your numbers and getting your accounting straight and things like that. But I think these are all, you know, short-term focuses as well that you kind of want to get into. I think, you know, part of the chat, you know, because I know any of the replay people who are listening, they're not going to be able to see it, but people are talking about clothing and the shoes. And I personally do a lot more shoes than clothing. And I think one of the reasons for that is obviously the ASPs of the shoes to me are much higher. I have a much harder time
selling, finding as many higher ASP clothing that I do shoes. Your typical clothing item outside of like high-end brands or coats, it's going to typically be sub $50. A lot of my stuff is, at least. And I could probably just get better at clothing it and find it. But I find that shoes, very few shoes sell for like $30. Most of your shoes outside of like the summer flip flops and things like that, your shoes are going to be selling for $60 or more. So I find it personally, I find it easier. I do have a free group on shoes and clothing on Facebook that you can find Your Source Inventory that Brittany Ross and I run. We have services too, but not going to use Dwayne's airtime for that. But these are generally the topics I was going to cover on our first show. Like I said, we're going to have a few guests coming in. Happy to answer random questions if people have any random questions. But in talking to Dwayne and talking about different things, this was really just some of our first conceptual ideas that I felt like his people focus on. The name of the show is Fast Turn Radio. People have kind of gotten away from it a little bit because that hasn't been the focus, and Dwayne's always delivering good value of different concepts of what's going on in the market, what's out there, what's new. I think for me, what's out there and what's new, some things that I can touch on right now is tools. I'd say, I'm a time guy. For me, it's all about time leverage and putting in less and less time, or having other people who do things for me spend less and less time. There's so many tools out there that weren't out there 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, that are just tremendous time savers. One of the things, that's become big, right? So OA X-ray came out on the scene last year, and they I wouldn't say revolutionized, but there was a lot of like online sourcing questions about how it's going to change things. And some people love it, some people don't. Not the point. The point is that was an interesting tool that kind of changed a little bit of the dynamics. Well, now there's another one called tactical arbitrage, which has a lot of interesting features to it as well. And if you're a shoes and clothing seller, it has this variation analyzer built into it. And there are now, Andy Slamans came out with a Variation Pro tool where it's basically a Chrome extension where that just analyzes the different variations. And so all these tools like leverage your time in different ways. There's the how many tool where people always were trying to check other people's inventory and put 999 in the cart. And it kind of does it for you. There's all these different things out there. And all these things are just making the market develop. I think you look back and you say the FBA market as a seller was kind of, in its infancy. And while it's still growing, I think there's definitely value in all these tools, and they have to fit your business. So I'm not telling you, oh, this one's better than that one, but I'm telling you, kind of look at them and understand what they do, understand the leverage and the time benefit that they give you, and the power that they have. Whether you do it, whether your employee does it, what they're using. I think there's just tremendous ways to kind of speed up everyone's process with a lot of the software and these tools and extensions that are out there. Some of these things probably have little value, and some of them have tremendous value. So you have to kind of analyze each one for yourself. Repricing is another topic that I think has become interesting because Amazon's repricer is starting to get feedback from people. I can honestly say I haven't toyed with it yet. I use App Eagle, but I know people who are, flirting with the idea of kind of using the homegrown one and kind of moving away from some of these others. And then there are sellers who are big, like Mendy, who, he swears by FeedVisor for all different kinds of reasons. So all depends on kind of where you are in your business and what makes sense to it. Mendy doesn't like Amazon's repricer. Again, I haven't tested it. I don't know. I've never used it. But again, tools are coming. Things are developing. Like we opened the show with, the inventory dashboard has a lot of these reports, very, very simple. at your fingertips to kind of know what's going on inside your business, which I think was the real key of this show, was understand what's going on in your business, understand what's tied up in dead inventory, and know how to generate extra cash, whether it's going through, I actually spoke to a seller the other week, and we were talking about something, and they told me they had over 800 units of stuff in their basement at the moment. And I said, are you holding it for something? Is there something that, is this like you bought on clearance, all these different things, and you're holding it out for the holidays? They're like, no, we're just backlogged. And I was shocked. I have to admit, I couldn't believe that someone's just sitting on 800 units that they just haven't gotten around to. That's basically what it is. And I feel like that's why there's prep services. Now, granted, people have problems with some of the prep services. People love their prep services. Again, test it. It's another tool. It's a leverage point. So Michael Flanagan has a very specialized type of warehouse prep service. Then you have PCP, which serves a specific purpose. I mean, it serves lots of purposes, but one of the things that it serves is it's in the tax-free state. So if you're going to do online arbitrage and certain stores aren't going to give you the tax exemption, this is something that helps. So New Hampshire and Oregon, there's another one out there. And then there's lots of other prep services, right? So the Bullards have one. Tony Patty has one. I think Holly Soda's out in, now she's in Washington. But again, the point is that all different things to leverage your business however you feel you're going to best use your time. And the chat is going off on the Amazon repricers. And I think that, the point that they're making really is, and correctly so, is Amazon's best interest is, for the customer, right? Amazon wants the customer to get the best price. And so therefore a lot of their tools are designed to get the customer the best price, not necessarily get the seller the best price. Whereas, the other tools out there in the marketplace are more designed for the sellers. Either way, test it out, give it a try, see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, Karen made a suggestion to try 3 SKUs in it and see what happens with it. That's not a bad idea. But if in general, the point was really to be focused on the different tools that are in the marketplace, understand what's going on, understand how you can leverage your business, and don't be afraid to spend on your business. Like spending $100 a month on a software tool, if that's going to break the bank, okay, you may want to revisit, how this business fits for you. But if it's something you're going to use, great. If it's something you're not going to use, don't spend the money just because everyone's talking about it. Think about what it does for you and how it really leverages your business. So unlike Dwayne, I didn't have like some big topic outside of this. This was, these were the kind of things I wanted to cover this week. Again, anyone in the chat, feel free to ask any questions, but this was really show number 1 for me sitting in. Wanted to kind of get it back to the fast turn roots of generating cash. Go through your long-term storage report that you can easily access now. Don't wait for the last minute to kind of tank on prices, but be a little bit mindful of where are you in relation to the buy box, and actually surprise you with excess cash. You generate some cash on dead inventory that you're just sitting on and you have no idea is kind of hanging out there. We talked a little bit about raising your ASP, which is a big thing of mine. We can talk about shoes and clothing a whole segment, but I didn't want to kind of railroad this one topic with that. And I think, I'm trying to read the chat at the same time. I don't know how Dwayne does it, actually. It's pretty funny. But that was my favorite inexpensive or free Chrome extensions. So How Many has 2 versions, right? They have the paid version, they have the free version. That is a very useful tool depending on what you're doing in your business. That's a useful tool. You can, if you use the free version, you get 5 runs added a day, meaning you can click the button 5 times and it'll tell you how many are in everyone's inventory without charging you. I think the other free ones, Keepa is a critical Chrome extension. If you don't have it, it doesn't do anything as an extension, but putting the extension in is what generates all the graphs and everything on your Amazon page. I was going to say it's not free, but if you sell in shoes and clothing, a must-have extension is RevSeller. It is so powerful. I can't even begin to say enough good things about it. The variation analyzer, whatever the heck that thing is called, variation. If I open up Chrome and kind of look, I can find it. But their variation component is just unbelievable because it also gives you all the out of stock ASINs. I think it's $100 a year, and it's phenomenal. It's the best. I'd say probably like the best $100 that you'll spend, because it puts everything right at your fingertips. It has so the other free extensions that I was using was like the FBA calculator, which basically if you were on the buy box page and you clicked on the free calculator, it would populate everything in the FBA calculator, and it pulls the ASIN and does it. The RevSeller one, which is not free, it has it already on the buy box. You don't have to go to another tab. It tells you the rank at the top as opposed to scrolling to the bottom. It tells you the sizing right there, so you know whether it's an oversized item or not. It tells you the weights. There are links to Camel from there. There are links to Keepa. There are Google links. So another thing that I used to do is I had free extension that I used was context search. So I'd highlight something, and then I would if you kind of right click it, there's a little drop down menu, and I'd kind of check Google. So if I wanted to check the pricing, because I find a lot of times, like when you're looking at things, the Amazon pricing it's in a little bit of a bubble in the sense of, again, shoes and clothing, what the Amazon world is saying, but maybe there's 100 other sites that are selling it for less. So I would use context search. But again, there's a button on the RevSeller, boom, click it, and it basically does the exact same thing. So the extensions are all mainly, they're mainly on laptops or desktops. What other, I have so many different things here. What are the other free ones? I do have, here's an interesting free one. It's called Cashback Watch. So that is one where basically tells you the best cashback sites. So if you are, meaning like if you're on Walmart and you're going to buy it from there, it'll tell you, Upromise is giving 5% from Walmart, but eBay is giving 6% or whatever it is. Now, I have personal favorites of cashback sites that I buy from, or have my people buy from. But if you don't have preferences and you're just all about the cashback number, that's an extension that you may want to look into. Again, it's totally free. I'm looking, a bunch of my other extensions are paid. This one's paid, and paid. So those are kind of like the free ones that I use. I know some people are very into Price Blink, which is a free one. I don't like it. It's more of an annoyance. So I don't use it. But those are kind of like the free. So Michael's talking about some of the paid ones. I do use Jungle Scout. I actually have both ASIN Inspector Pro and Jungle Scout Pro. I like to compare the data on them for their cost. It just, it's interesting to see where they kind of extrapolate the estimated sales and where the variation between the two of them are. Each one has different nuances that are better and worse than the other. And so I kind of like the fact that I have both and can compare and contrast. ASIN Inspector Pro, they do a lot of different things. It can do what How Many does inside the Pro version, and the Pro version also pulls the estimated sales onto the actual page itself without needing to open another tab. So like Jungle Scout kind of pops open like almost like a pop-up box onto your buy box page, whereas ASIN Inspector opens another tab in Chrome. Slightly different ways of doing things, but if you have ASIN Inspector Pro, it actually embeds it like RevSeller and embeds it on the actual buy box. So I think, Michael's making the point that I totally agree with, that all these tools, you have to decide really what makes sense for you. OA X-ray may or may not make sense for you. Tactical arbitrage may or may not make sense for you. These Jungle Scout or ASIN Inspector Pro, they may or may not make sense for you. It's really, it depends on your business, what you're doing. If you're RAOA, that kind of stuff. Some people who are very big RA, there's another extension out there like this Brick Seeker one where, Nate McAllister came out with, I think Christopher Grant came out with Nate. I'm never really sure who's the creator and the owner, but it allows you to check the stores locally for things where it may be sold out online, but it's in stores. But if you don't do RA, it's not really pertinent to you. But if you do, maybe it's a super valuable tool. We talked about the Variation Pro, which is Andy Slamman's one. Tactical arbitrage, like I said, has a variation component in it. But again, these are really things for if you're selling in the variation spaces, which is shoes and clothing, which is something that, I personally obviously sell a lot in. I don't see any other questions. So if that is it, I think we are going to wrap it up 4 minutes early, which is probably right on time for everyone. Again, I appreciate everyone for joining live, who was able to be here, and all the listeners who end up listening later. Great. We will do this on its regular scheduled night, as Dwayne always has it, on Wednesday night. And like I said, I think we will have some guests. And if there are topics you want me to talk about, I'm more than happy to. Mendy did mention that there's a Amazon Women's Conference coming up. I don't have the link to that handy, so if someone has it, feel free to put it in the chat. I've seen it in a few groups posted, but I don't have it handy. Yes, this is being recorded. We will have a replay, just like Dwayne always does it. It'll be uploaded to all the normal places. And so I think that about covers it. All right, so I appreciate it again, and we'll see you next time. All right, take care.